Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Extravagant Trade Group, and this is a quick bonus video for tonight. It is Monday, the December 2nd, and I forgot that I had a concept or information that I wanted to go over in tonight's video about China. So I'm going to do a quick video on that tonight. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer there. This video is for education purposes only. So the reason why I'm doing this video is because we've seen a huge amount of option activity calls in both the Hang Seng and the Shanghai indices that have US ETFs that are tracking these indices. So what I'm going to go through real quick is the option activity. And the first one that I want to go over with you is what's known as YINN. All right. So this ETF, when you look at this ETF, I'm just going to bring up the explanation so that you could see this for yourself. But this is a leveraged ETF, and it's actually 3 times leveraged ETF. And this is the China FTSE, so FTSE China Bull. So this closely resembles the FXI, which again is going to try to track. It doesn't track perfectly, but it's the Hang Seng. So if you look at the FXI and look at the individual names, because this is what you really want to know is, hey, what you're tracking. So the FXI, it has in this, of course, names that you should be somewhat familiar with if you're a regular trader: Tencent, Alibaba, JD.com, Trip.com, Bank of China, right? And there's a whole bunch of ADRs on this, which you may have traded these: Baidu, NTES, so on and so forth. But it's important to remember with China, right? All these indices, they trade overnight, right? So they trade while the US market is closed. That's why you'll see a lot of these ETFs like FXI, ASHR, KWEB, they gap, right? And they'll also move if also the futures are moving there as well. But there's a bit of gap risk whenever you're trading some of these ADRs, because they've already moved decently overnight based on what the local markets are doing. All right, so let's go back to this activity just for a second. All right, we started to see this towards the end of last week, and we're still seeing it today. So last week, there's about 99,000 of these January 2026 calls. So they're not going out to this January, they're going out to next January. So this is quite a bit of time that they're buying here. 99,000 contracts plus another 38,000 today, right? This is pretty lofty, right? This is pretty expensive. And keep in mind, with options, you're already getting leverage. So now you're putting leverage upon leverage with a 3 times long ETF. So I'm not going to track the technicals in YINN, because as if you're familiar with leverage ETFs, there's slippage on a day-to-day basis because they have to rebalance daily, right? The single beta ETF does not need to rebalance daily because it's not leveraged, right? And I'm not going to go into that concept in this video, but that's why if you hold long term, those leverage ETFs will often not track very well, if you just do the math of 3 times what the FXI does. Now, if there's a big move, the leverage ETF is going to do well. But this is how I sometimes often use option activities. When I see something on the tape, it has to agree with my technicals. So this is the FXI ETF, and what we're looking at here is the the weekly chart here, right? So obviously earlier this year we had a big move in the China ETFs, right? This thing launched from about 26 bucks, all the way up to 36, which is a heck of a percentage move. Now, after this, the rally really fizzled. But where we are now is we're coming back to the top of the 2024 value area. So what is the 2024 value area, right? Well, the value areas that are on my screen, these are called the market webs. They're based on volume at price. So what we're doing is we're taking all of the activity from the previous year. You can see that with the volume profile. And we're basically drawing a value area which is based on statistics. I'm not going to get into the statistics in this video, but it really creates some great support and resistance levels. That's all that you need to know for now. The top of the value area earlier this year acted as really good and did a great job of telling us where there was resistance right at this 29.51 level. Right. So we've rallied through this and now we're back checking this. So if I were to go long stock here, what I would be doing is going long basically versus the top of the value area. All right. And that's right around 20. That's 29. So that's a very easy technical way to do this. All right. I'm going to come back to this just for a second because the other ETF that we're seeing option activity in is CHAU. Now, this may be an ETF that you're not that familiar with because I don't know if I've seen option activity in this thing before. So what is this? All right. So this tracks, and it's the other ETF was 3 times leveraged. This is 2 times, right? 2 times, and it's the China A shares. Now, A shares are different than the Hang Seng, right? As we went through in the Hang Seng, you've got names like Alibaba, JD.com. It's quite different. So this is meant to track, and I'll bring this back up. All right, this is meant to track this index, the CSI 300. Now I'm going to bring this index up for you and you can see the holdings of this. Probably you're not, well, sorry, I can't bring up the actual index, but there is an ETF that tracks this index, right? And that's ASHR, much different than FXI and KWEB. So ASHR, sorry about that. All right, so you can see what it's meant to track is the China A shares 300, just as we went over in that index. This one I can bring up the holdings because it's an ETF, and you can see it's all these local shares. You're probably not familiar with many of these companies, other than maybe you've heard of like the Industrial Bank of China, but there's no Alibaba in here. There's no Baidu, right? There's no NTES and so on and so forth. So very different constituents, members of the index. So again, I'm not going to bring up CHAU other than I'm just noting that someone's putting out a very large uh, bet on this index. And again, they're buying time with this. They're going all the way out to May of 2025. So not quite as long as the other ETF that we looked at, but look at 210,000 contracts traded today. All right. So again, I don't think that they're selling these. I think that someone is placing a very large bet that they're going to see something go on in China. Probably, I would guess. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with China and so forth. But probably there could be another. I would think that there might be another big wave of stimulus, like we saw a few months ago. So let's look at the technicals in this ETF. So this is ASHR. It's going to be a little bit different. Again, this is the weekly chart, so this value area is for the whole year, but this broke through the value area and then kind of came back in. Now, it still has support, but if it rallies, it's going to have to deal with resistance again, right around $31, right? So those are two things, two ETFs, YINN, which is 3 times long FXI, and CHAU, which is 2 times long ASHR. Now, whenever I see this, right, you could make your own trade. So for example, look at the KWEB ETF. I actually really like the technicals in this better than what I've seen in the last 2 ETFs. Why do I like this? Because, after a big decline, right, this is, if you read Stan Weinstein, like this is stage 4 decline, right? And now this began to base a little bit in 2023, but it had a little bit of a downward trajectory to it. After that downward trajectory, it kind of really went sideways, and now it's starting to kind of break that range. So what we have is a real aggressive move, right? Like we saw with the other ETFs, and we're just back checking now, right? We're back checking into support. And I think that this is an attractive area to go long. And you could go, so there's a couple different ways that you could play, getting exposure to China. You could just go long the ETFs, right? In a regular stock trade with a stop of, I would say $30 is how I would play it, right? Or you could use some options, right? And that's what I decided to do just to get a little bit of a piece of the action. I went long the KWEB January 32 calls. So that's this January. So I'm not buying as much time as they are. And I may need to adjust that if this trade doesn't work. But for now, I'm only spending $1. Right. And that's a nice way to get myself some leverage exposure. And people forget because there's so options are used so much. But one of the main reasons is, options are used obviously for hedging, but they're also used for speculation. So this sense, the options give me a nice speculative position. If by chance China announces some type of crazy stimulus in the next month and a half before this January 30th, January options expiration, this trade should do pretty well, right? And again, I'm defining my risk. Notice I put my stop on this trade as 0, right? I'm basically just saying, hey, I'm risking $1.05, and we'll see if there's something that's announced in China over the next month and a half. Now, I can finagle with this if I want to and say, hey, this is just giving myself some exposure. And then if I want to, I can go long the ETF, or I could pick some individual names out, and I can do that as well, as we're starting to see some option activity in the individual names. All right. So I just wanted to cover something that we've seen that's pretty unusual to me in the last couple of days, is a real big pickup in the China ETF volume and various different indices, which I broke down for you, and my trade as well. So this is a freebie video, but this is the analysis that we do at Tribeca Trade Group. And I will further kind of look at this in the weeks, and probably try to get a little bit more exposure, but I'll do that in the Tribeca trading room. Guys, have a great night, and thanks for watching.